In this episode, let's talk about the phone calls Alex was off making just minutes after first responders arrived at Moselle, Dick's failing courtroom prowess, where we'll try to find out how many defense attorneys it takes to play a video in court, and we'll pay tribute to the first witness in the trial, Sergeant Daniel Green's 3-year-old daughter, who tragically died this summer in an accident. Come with me as we review Day 2 of the murder trial, using what we now know that we didn't know then, as we try to reconstruct what happened the night of the murder. I really appreciate your comments that help fill in pieces I've missed and makes me feel like this is a group effort here. As always, thanks so very much for your support. We just passed 6,000 subscribers today, so thanks to each and every one of you. Your views, likes, and subscriptions keep me inspired to keep bringing you content with no ads in the middle to interrupt. This is Trial Discussions with Cassidy, Day 2 of the Murdaugh Murder Trial. Welcome.
And we're ready to proceed by the state.
Yes, we are.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, the state would call Sergeant Daniel Green.
On a sad side note, Sergeant Green's 3-year-old daughter was killed in a car accident this past summer. Here is her obituary and some photos of her, and I dedicate this episode in her memory. I visited Edisto Beach when I was in South Carolina, so I've added some video I took at the beach, since her obituary says that it was her favorite place. Rest in peace, Carter Olivia Green.
Did Mr. Murdaugh give you any possible explanation for this when you approached him?
His immediate reaction was to start telling me about an incident that had happened with his son with a boating accident.
With the boating accident?
Yes, sir.
Had you asked him anything about that?
I did not.
So right away, it's brought up about Alex mentioning the boat crash, and we'll get back to that very soon. It's going to come up a lot, actually.
May I have Sergeant Green show this firearm to the jury?
Yes.
Be sure not to point at anybody, please.
I put this clip in here just as a reminder that this is how you handle a firearm respectfully in court, and not the way that Dick did. This is a double murder trial where Dick's client's wife and son were shot down in gruesome ways. They suffered serious pain before dying. Her other son Buster is in the courtroom, as well as other relatives and friends, and this is Dick's idea of funny? Even worse, he points it at Creighton and says tempting. This created quite the uproar on social media at the time.
I passed the driveway that I was supposed to have turned down. Like I said, everything's kind of dark out there. It wasn't clearly indicated, so.
So while he's describing the two driveways, I'll show you some of my footage from Moselle as it looks now. First, you'll see the guest house that they talk about. Paul stayed there sometimes when he was home, and in the timeline he goes there shortly before dinner. We know that he goes there because his phone links to the Wi-Fi there. Next, you'll see some kind of outbuilding that's falling apart. And then you can see how easy it is to miss this at night. Even in day, it's not clear. But this is the kennel entrance with the mailbox that they mentioned. I would hate to have to check the mail at this house. I won't call it a driveway for obvious reasons. It's more or less a grassy path. Please keep this so-called driveway in mind, as Dick will make a fuss over them driving up on it and supposedly destroying tire marks. And later in the trial, you'll hear experts talk about the existence of these so-called tire impressions. When I was there, I drove to show the distance between the two entrances. I drove about 30 miles per hour. So here is that video. And I put an overhead picture as a reference to what's going on behind the tree line.
Right there to the left of the screen, what did you see right there?
To the left was Paul's body. He was laying face down on the ground, large pool of blood around him, as well as a great deal of water that was immediately around his body.
Was it that water, was it just around, was it down the entire kennel concrete pad, or was it mostly just...
No, you could see walking down the kennel as I got out. The closer I got to Paul's body, the more water there was.
Had it been raining enough at this point in time to wet the entire, to cause that amount of water?
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for speculation.
Objection's overruled.
Answer the question, please.
I don't recall if it had been raining a whole lot that evening, but given where the water was, it did not appear that rain had caused that water.
In regards to the water at the kennels by Paul's body, on the kennel video, we hear the water come on not long before Bubba grabs the bird. When Alex testifies later, he says he catches Bubba and gets that bird out of his mouth in only 10 to 15 seconds. He then claims that he leaves very soon after that, back up to the house and off to his mom's. We know from phone activity that Paul was killed 4 minutes later, and Maggie shortly after that, no doubt. So where did this much water come from? But while I was thinking about that, it made me think about something else. We know that he was forced into admitting that he was at the kennels after his voice was clearly heard and identified by multiple people in court. But when he took the stand and said he was finally going to tell the truth, and he admitted that he had in fact gone to the kennels, he still was lying. He was lying because he said that he came down to the kennels later, that he had laid down to take a nap and started feeling bad about not going down there because Maggie had asked him to go down there. And so he got up, got on the cart, and went down there. Why do I say he's lying? Because Maggie didn't walk to the kennels. Her phone registers 43 steps, a few steps more than her 38 steps coming in from her car when she arrived. We know the cart is up at the house because Alex and Paul were riding around in it, and Alex drove it up. So yes, Alex drove it down to the kennels, but Maggie rode in it with him. She registered just enough steps to walk to the cart, whereas Paul registered 283 steps, which is a little less than his earlier walk before dinner when he walked up from the area of the guest house. We know he was at the guest house before dinner because his phone linked to the Wi-Fi there and his location shows it. He walks 303 steps from 8:05 to 8:15, pauses, and walks 140 more till he gets home at 8:21:45 for a total of 443 steps, which would make the difference from the kennels to the guest house. So he obviously walked to the house for dinner and back to the kennels after. Paul didn't drive Maggie, as Alex will tell the police later when they start asking how did they get down here, where's the vehicle? And that subject will come up, so please remember this. So obviously, in spite of what Alex said, Maggie rode with Alex down to the kennels. Now the golf cart on the scene, it will come up that it had a flat tire and wasn't drivable. It also didn't have any tracks in front of or behind it, so it wasn't driven that night. Paul, from what I understand, was staying at the guest house. Why would Alex leave Maggie at the kennels with no vehicle in the dark night to walk back home while he took the cart? If he was in a rush to go to his mom's, leave her the cart, walk back to the house yourself. Why would he have left her to come back to the house on foot, alone, while Paul went to the guest house? Listen to this clip from Morgan, who dated Paul for 4 years. She spent thousands of hours with this family, took trips around the world with them, knew them well.
Miss Maggie going down to the kennels. I think about that a lot. She never did that. If it was dark, she would be in the house. Miss Maggie was a scared person. If Mr. Alec wasn't home, she would make Paul sleep in the bedroom that was right next to hers. So I feel like she would have been called down there for a reason.
Does any of this make sense? Did Maggie seem like a woman who was just going to walk up in the absolute dark? There's no lighting on the path between the kennels and the house. Does she look like the kind of person that would have said, "Yeah, take the cart. I'll walk back alone"? Alex left without Maggie on the cart because Maggie was dead when he left. But back to the water. That water only ran for a very short period of time on that video, and Alex claims he left immediately. Maggie and Paul were killed 4 minutes after Paul took that video. How did so much water accumulate around Paul's body? The other kennels weren't soaked, but there were dogs way down that line. Why was there so much water around Paul? Let's put a pin in that, because it's going to come up again later.
Central Supplemental Service scene is secure.
Now this clip is just to show the dogs barking because someone has arrived on the scene. Even after their poor ears were blasted with gunfire from a very close range and were probably still ringing because dogs' ears are so sensitive, they're still barking when a stranger approaches. And you'll hear them continuously barking throughout this whole body cam video.
Because of the scene, I did go get a gun and bring it down here.
It's in your vehicle? Do you have any guns on you at all?
No, sir. It's leaning up against the side of my car.
Okay. You're fine, man. You're fine. Turn around for me.
I don't have any.
Okay. Yes, sir. I see that. Okay. This is your wife and son? Okay.
Now I want you to notice the way Daniel Green is speaking to Alex, even at the mention of a gun. He was not grabbed, spun around, pinned down. He was not being treated like a suspect or in an aggressive way at all. Now please keep this in mind for later on in the trial when Alex claims otherwise. Let's keep in mind too what's not happening here. He's supposedly so scared he went straight to the house to get a gun to protect himself, but he hasn't bothered to call Buster. He's so afraid that this is vengeance for the boat crash, trying to convince everyone that this is vengeance for the boat crash, but he doesn't think to warn Buster? What else isn't happening? Really anything that makes us believe that this man has just unexpectedly walked up on the murdered bodies of his wife and son. There's an expression, "I can't believe this is happening." It's the usual reaction to things like this that are so shocking, so traumatic, our minds can't accept it. Denial is a huge part of the cycle of grief, and it's the very first step in the cycle. It also tends to keep coming back to the person that cannot believe this actually happened. That's why in my last podcast, I mentioned Jackie Kennedy's reaction to John Kennedy getting shot right next to her, seeing a piece of his head go flying to the back of the car, and she jumps onto the back of the car to grab it. She carries that piece to the hospital, gives it to a doctor, and asks if he can use it, if there's a way to save him. It's why people will perform CPR on a loved one that's already gone cold, and even at times rigor mortis has set in. At this point, normally, people are asking, can you help them? Is there any way to save them? Or even demanding that someone try to save them, even when their eyes are seeing that their loved one is beyond saving. When my mom called and told me that my grandpa died, it was around midnight. I had been asleep, but I got up and I sat in my rocking chair, holding my phone in my lap, expecting her to call back and say that he had been resuscitated by CPR at the hospital. That was the only outcome my mind would accept. I was sure it was going to happen. Hours later, when the sun came up and shone through my window where I still sat holding my phone, the truth finally started to sink in. The mind doesn't want to accept something like this immediately upon seeing it or hearing it. People rationalize ridiculous things like, well, I've heard you can live without certain parts of your brain. Maybe there's enough left. Is it logical? No. But in the middle of shock and grief, logic is dead. But instead of those things, Alex is rambling about a boat wreck and people who've hurt Paul within minutes and without being asked. Usually police have to break people out of their shell of denial and ask, do you know anyone who would want to hurt them? This guy hasn't even gotten to ask their names yet, and Alex is talking about the boat crash. In fact, this isn't even the first mention. 5 minutes and 24 seconds into the 911 phone call, he told dispatchers the same thing. The dispatcher was still asking about their names, their conditions, are they breathing, getting helpful information about how to find the house, and he starts with the boat crash. This feels like a performance, not a reaction to finding your loved ones dead.
This is the firearm you brought from inside the house?
Sir, yes, sir. I went and this is a long story. My son was in a boat wreck a few months back. He's been getting threats. Most of it's been benign stuff we didn't take serious.
Okay.
He's been getting like punched. I know that's what it is.
Okay. When did...
Was that when you previously testified that he mentioned the boat case or the boat wreck?
That's correct. Prior to me asking him anything about it, he did mention it.
Did you get home right when you called, or did you go to the house first? Where is the house?
I came to the house first. My mom has late stages Alzheimer's, and my dad is in the hospital.
Okay.
Right away with the Alzheimer's, and my dad's in the hospital. Too much description. Too much deflection. He wants people to pity him. The focus is more on him.
I don't know what time. I can go back on my phone and tell you the exact times. Did you check?
Okay. Did I check what?
Did you check them?
We got medical guys that are that's what they're gonna do. Okay.
Notice he asks, did you check? Not, can somebody help them? Did you find a pulse? Where are the medical people? Can they hurry and help them? No. Did you check them? And he also uses this to distract from answering questions that he's fumbling over. He'll just stray from the question he was trying to answer. Did you check them? Did they check them? He's using it as a distraction.
They are dead, aren't they?
Yes, sir. That's what it looks like.
Just a few minutes later, did you check them? They're dead, aren't they?
What is Mr. Murdaugh doing at this particular time?
He's on the phone, pacing around, talking to someone. I'm not sure who he was talking to at that point.
Did he ask you to confirm if they were dead?
He did. He asked multiple times while I was on scene.
Did you ever see him, any tears, any physical tears?
I did not.
Did you ever see him approach the bodies?
I did not see him approach them, no.
Did you observe any visible blood on him?
There was no blood on him that I could see.
The bodies, as you saw them, was there a lot of blood around them given the injuries they had suffered?
Yes, there was a pool of blood around each of the bodies that extended out from the body.
When was the last time you were here with them, or talked to them, or anything like that?
So when he was asked about the last time that he saw them, that should have been very clear in his head. But instead, he wastes 7 seconds of sniffing before he tries to answer that question. Though the boat stuff just rolled off his tongue, he has to think about this answer because he's making it up. And we now know for certain that he was lying about the last time he saw them. So we get a look into what Alex looks like when he's lying, based on a lie that he admitted in court that he told. Sergeant Green has only been gentle, kind, even when removing the gun from the car. He didn't examine it, immediately say run ballistics, check Alex for gun residue, start demanding to know where Alex was, what he was doing. He lets him walk off in the middle of questions to talk to Randy. He doesn't follow him in case he runs. He just calmly, gently asks him questions with a lot of space in between. Really lets Alex control the whole conversation. Again, remember this point.
It was earlier tonight. I don't know the exact time, but
Okay.
I left. I was probably gone an hour and a half from my mom's, and I saw them about 45 minutes before that.
His answer after the pause is given without realizing that his car was going to place him at the house until after the murders, without realizing Paul had captured his voice on a video, without realizing Shelley would tell the truth about his time at his mom's. At this point, he feels pretty safe to lie because he left his phone at the house when he came down to the kennels. He probably doesn't expect the car to give away so much information. He probably expects Shelley is going to cover for him. So he's leaving a wide range of time to distance himself from when he knows the murder took place. Instead of saying, they couldn't have gotten far, I wasn't gone long. Can we put up checkpoints? Can we ask the public if they saw anything? Can we ask the neighbors if they heard shots, and if so, what time? Nothing ever about finding the person or persons, and nothing about getting help for Maggie and Paul. Imagine yourself in this situation. Wouldn't you be as helpful and truthful as possible to the ones that are there to help sort the crime out? Instead, he's wasting time talking about the boat crash, his mom and dad, useless information. Just, did you check them? Are they dead? And upon confirmation, when they say, yeah, they're dead, there's no dropping to his knees, crying out. There's no screaming, no, it can't be. My wife, my love, my son, my baby boy. None of that, not even close to that. He's concentrating on putting 2 hours and 15 minutes between finding them and the last time he saw them to avoid becoming a suspect. When in fact, he put his car in gear and left Moselle at 9:06 and he made the 911 call at 10:06, exactly 1 hour later to the minute. He knows it hadn't been 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Okay.
I rode around with Paul for 2 hours this afternoon in the pickup truck.
That's your son, Paul?
Saying I rode around with Paul also sounds to me like creating a narrative. Just like when he takes the stand to testify, he starts the nonsense of Paw, Row, Mags. He's trying to paint a picture of how close they were to also look less guilty.
Somebody going to check them?
Yes, sir. They've already checked them.
They did check them?
Yes, sir.
It's official that they're dead?
Yes, sir. That's what it looks like.
And there he goes again. Is somebody going to check him? Then the creepiest line. It's official that they're dead? Official that they're dead? Official? It's so odd. He's waiting for confirmation that in fact they're dead. All hope is gone. Not normal. It's like he wants them to be declared dead.
What's her name?
Her name's Maggie Murdaugh. Margaret Brandstetter Murdaugh. How you doing?
What's her birthday?
Pause it right there. What did the defendant just say? Let me back it up.
Margaret Brandstetter Murdaugh. How you doing?
What did the defendant say right there?
So while I'm in the process of gathering information about the two victims from Mr. Murdaugh, somebody walks by behind me and he pauses what he's telling me to say, hey, how you doing?
How you doing?
Yeah.
And who was that he said that to?
I'm not 100% certain. I believe it was a fire rescue individual.
This how you doing? It's just so weird to me that he's supposed to be in this absolute despair over losing his wife and son, and he breaks character to greet someone. I think when you're really feeling the feelings that he's supposed to be feeling at that moment, of discovering your wife and son brutally murdered, it doesn't seem likely to even have this kind of awareness. Someone new's on the scene and you've got to greet them. It's odd. Other odd behavior is Alex so far away making phone call after phone call. Why would he be down there making his phone calls? Even though they're dead, wouldn't he want to be near them? Some people don't want to let go long after their loved one is gone. When your loved one dies in a hospital, the staff gives you time alone with them. The struggle to leave even their dead bodies is so real. Some people have trouble even after the burial, leaving the cemetery. They don't want to let go, but he's just off as far as he can be making phone calls. He never took them in his arms. He never cradled them. He is blood free. It's very unusual. Now, speaking on all of these phone calls, let's look at his phone call list from that night. Like I mentioned earlier, he doesn't call Buster for a long time, so that's the first weird thing. His first call is to his brother Randy. Now, this makes sense. His dad's in the hospital. He probably doesn't want to call him with this. I don't know if his dad was even up to speaking with him on the phone at this point. His mom has dementia, so turning to his sibling, especially his oldest brother in such a case, is normal. Next, John Marvin, his other brother. He doesn't call his sisters. He doesn't call his friends. He doesn't call his law partners. And most notably, as I said, he doesn't call Buster. This is going to come up more again, but remember he messed with Paul's phone. If any of you haven't watched, he explains Paul's phone being placed on his butt, as you're soon to hear, was supposedly because it fell out of Paul's pocket. But Rogan, who was waiting for the video of his dog's tail, had been trying to contact Paul this whole time. It's interesting that the person who'd been calling is the next one Alex calls. And he doesn't just call him once. Look at this phone record. Now at 10:20:08, Paul's phone reacts and his display comes on. 10:21:25, Alex calls Rogan. What a coincidence, right? Because Paul's phone display would have shown missed call from Rogan, missed message from Rogan. And then the very next minute, that's Alex's next phone call. So Alex calls Rogan then, but Rogan doesn't answer. Then he calls him again. 3 minutes later, no answer. 10 seconds later, he iMessages him, call me. He FaceTimes him. And that's when Daniel Green arrives. So Daniel Green and Alex speak for a short time, as we saw in the video. Then Alex calls his brother Randy. He makes sure to tell Sergeant Green that that's who he's talking to. I'm talking to my brother. But that call only lasts 42 seconds. And he walks away from Sergeant Green while he's on that phone call. Because as soon as he's far enough away from Daniel Green, he FaceTimes Rogan again at 10:30. At 10:35, he calls John Marvin after FaceTiming Rogan, but he only speaks to John Marvin for 28 seconds, perhaps so he can say, I called my brothers, in case he gets asked. I was calling my brothers. He calls Randy again at 10:36, and finally, at 10:44:20, he calls Buster. Buster ignores his call. Alex calls Brooklyn. Brooklyn's mom texts them all three in a group text. Then, Nolan Tootin calls Buster, and he picks up for him, and the call lasts for 60 seconds. Immediately after, Buster calls Maggie's phone, so apparently Nolan told him something about Maggie. So after ignoring Alex's call, taking Nolan's call, Buster calls Maggie, and then he calls Rogan. It doesn't go through, and then finally, he calls Alex back at 10:47, 41 minutes after Alex called 911. Why, after opening Paul's phone and seeing Rogan's missed calls and missed messages, was Alex trying so hard to get through to Rogan? Did he have an irrational fear that perhaps Paul had called him, or that Rogan might have overheard something?
Who was that standing way off in the distance there?
That would be Mr. Murdaugh.
Where did he spend the majority of his time while you were there after your initial interaction with him?
From this point on, his general time was spent in that area where he's currently standing.
Pretty far away from the scene?
That's correct.
The gentleman in the white shirt is the husband of her, the father of him. That is Paul Murdaugh. This is his mother. Paul Murdaugh was that got in a boating accident from a while back, if you remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just then, were you describing the boat wreck?
Yes, it had been in local news previously, so.
And it was your understanding that Paul was involved in that?
In some way, I had no idea about the actual details of the case to know what his involvement was, honestly.
So here we see Alex's boat crash plant worked. It's on Daniel's mind, and that's one of the first things he mentions to his superior as he arrives on the scene. The next clip is just a weird reaction from Buster that I picked up while watching. The video playing at the time is just Daniel Green walking around the crime scene. I don't know why he starts smirking, watching this sergeant walk around his dead mother and brother, but it's so bizarre. So Alex is off making phone calls. No one is suspecting him, or they'd be trying to listen. He could be calling accomplices, arranging a getaway, just about anything, but they let him be. Then his brother arrives, and the only concern is keeping him away from the crime scene so he doesn't disturb anything. But once they figure out a way to get him through, he's allowed to talk to Alex, to be with Alex, to touch Alex. Alex has been given complete freedom, no restrictions. He's been spoken to kindly, barely asked any questions when you think about it. Showed no signs of paranoia or defensiveness, didn't seem to be on drugs. Now keep this in mind for later in the trial. None of the things he describes later as his reason for lying about being at the kennels are present at all.
Alex over there.
Alex.
Okay.
Okay.
There's a guy over here that wants to talk to him.
Yeah, but I didn't know if you wanted me to tell him that or if you wanted me to just chill for a minute. Or if you wanted me to escort him over.
He does not need to walk over
No,
there.
I mean a long way.
He does not need to go over there.
So you can stay there then.
He can.
Let me ask you this. Before you had referred to a brother arriving, is that correct?
Yes.
And was that a brother? Was he allowed to talk to Alec and go over to Alec?
I believe he did. I don't recall. I never actually interacted with him at all.
And then this discussion right here with Deputy Pruitt, what was going on right there?
So there was someone that had arrived on scene and wanted to go and speak with Mr. Murdaugh. I told him to just wait a minute on allowing him over there so we could determine the best way to allow them to talk, simply because the crime scene was so large and we did not want to contaminate anything that didn't need to be.
Okay. To your knowledge, was that individual, whoever it was, allowed to interact with Mr. Murdaugh?
I believe so. He was eventually, yes.
People that arrived were allowed to go see Mr. Murdaugh, is that correct?
That's correct.
He was not in custody at any time, is that correct?
No.
As further proof that they haven't centered on Alex as a suspect, they're considering that Paul may have pulled a murder-suicide. They want to check to see if perhaps he shot Maggie, shot himself, and fell on his gun, that maybe the gun is under him somehow. Some of the officers notice and think it's odd that Paul's phone is on his butt. They realize he could not have put it there himself. There's no natural way that his phone ended up on his butt. But Sergeant Green calms their suspicions, telling them that Alex had checked their pulses before they got there as a possible explanation. He still does not sound suspicious of Alex.
What is that discussion about right there?
So the whole purpose for even trying to look up under him was to determine if there was an additional firearm on scene already, possibly under Paul. There was 300 blackout casings found near Maggie. They were trying to determine if there was possibly a 300 blackout rifle under Paul.
And were y'all concerned that there may be one under Paul?
We just trying to rule it out as a possibility.
And what was that possibility then?
That he could have shot Maggie.
And then did what?
Shot himself.
So you're looking to see if there's a gun underneath if he had shot himself and then fallen on top of it?
That's correct.
I haven't asked the dad about the phone, but dad did say he came over and checked the pulses.
Did you see a phone near Paul when you arrived on the scene?
Yes, there was a phone laying on top of him near his back pockets of his shorts.
I'm going to back it up just a little bit. Is that it right down there at the bottom?
That's it.
I haven't asked the dad about the phone, but dad did say he came over and checked the pulses. Beyond that, I don't know what else they may have done.
I find it very odd that Alex was looking at his dead son and even noticed his phone. Who's concerned with a phone in such a situation? So much that they're going to pick it up. Again, in the 19 seconds between Alex getting out of his Suburban, running up to Paul, checking his pulse, running to Maggie, checking her pulse, and running back to his Suburban to make the 911 phone call. Now we're adding checking his phone and putting it on his butt, which really makes those 19 seconds impossible again, by the way. But not only that, to me, it's a really weird thing to do. You've just found your dead son's body. You don't cradle him, but you notice his phone, and of all things, you put it on his butt, like he's an end table, like his body is just an object. It's very strange.
So, as he's preparing this, you indicated, you were asked by Mr. Waters, said there was water on the ground, right? It hadn't been raining, and you saw water, right?
That's correct.
And as I understand it, and we're going to look at the video in just a minute, that water was primarily, at least what we see in your video, on the concrete area around the dog pens, correct?
That's what it appeared, yes.
Okay. And let's go to that first.
And now it's Dick's time to shine.
Now, you're walking down in front of the dog pens. Is this the water you're referring to?
Yes.
And you have dogs?
I have one dog.
You don't keep him in a pen?
No, he stays in the house.
Okay. But if you had hunting dogs and you had this line of, how many pens do you think there were?
I honestly couldn't tell you. I mean, there's a lot.
8, 9, 10?
Sure.
And are you familiar with the concept of washing a pen out after a dog defecates in the pen?
I've never personally done it, but I'm sure that's what you would do to clean out a pen.
Okay. And in the pen, I mean, there's water inside the pens and outside the pens, correct?
That's what it looks like.
Okay. Go ahead.
After several minutes of having to have someone else put up the clip he wanted on the player because he doesn't know how, this is what we see.
Again, we're looking at the dog pen, and the water appears to be outside the pen on the concrete.
I would object. I think that the video needs to be stopped for counsel to ask this question and for the witness to respond.
You're posing a question while playing a video,
I'm sorry, Aaron.
or making a statement while playing the video.
I'm sorry. The technology again is beyond my.
The court reporter has to stand up like, wait, I can't hear him. And I love Judge Newman's response. He corrects himself and says, well, not asking a question, but making a statement. So basically it's a 2-in-1. He's speaking over a loud video where not even the court reporter can hear him, and making a statement instead of questioning the witness, which is not allowed. How has this man gotten this far in courtrooms? I do not understand when people talk about what a legend he is, what a great attorney he is. He seems so ill-prepared. Then it gets worse.
Okay, so again, this shows the same area, shows water on the concrete outside these dog pens, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Go to the next one, please. So again, this shows, actually there's a light shining and you see a couple dogs. So those pens are occupied by dogs. There's water outside the pen and inside the pen, as if somebody had attempted to wash something out of the pens, correct?
There is water both inside and outside of the pen, yes.
You got one more? So I want you to go to the transcript. You need to switch it to the video. Again, I apologize, Your Honor, but the technology is more complicated than. So, okay. And let me ask you this. How about go to 4439, please? And let's watch 10 At least 10, if not 15 seconds of that.
He keeps saying, the technology is so difficult for me. It's a DVD in a laptop. That's been around at least 20 years. Why has he never bothered to learn this sort of thing? How has he not bothered to learn this sort of thing in 20 years? He relies so much on his reputation and his tricks and being difficult for opposing counsel rather than learn how to be a better lawyer in court.
Your Honor, I'd object. They're putting a transcript that's not been...
No, we're going to play the video.
It's up on the screen. It's up on the screen, Your Honor. I'd object.
I apologize.
Can you take it down, please? Thank you.
We have to prepare the transcript. It's synced with the video.
Okay. Well, I object to that. Your Honor, I object. This transcript's not been provided. There's no need for a transcript. The officer is here. They can play the video and he can comment.
The transcript being offered.
I'm using it to direct the audio-visual man to...
Well, you have questions for the witness, questions for your IT guy. You're just reading, ready to proceed. I understand. We're waiting for you. Okay.
Yep.
I'm ready. What was the time? 17.
It's page 17. Line and start at line 8. Rather than having to play this, let me just cut to the chase. It's taking too much time.
I call that scene, how many defense attorneys does it take to play a video clip? But I guess we'll never know because they never did get it to work. And mind you, in this part, what he's attempting to show and to tell the jury and to tell Detective Green how poorly he thinks he did his job. The irony. How much does he charge per hour? And by contrast, when Creighton's up, he runs all of his own equipment. And I'll never forget the hearing I attended, where Creighton had to face 3 different defense teams. Not defense lawyers, defense teams in the same morning. And he held it together better than the whole lot of them.
On this transcript, on this tape, fire rescue person says to you, I believe you agreed with me, set of prints behind the trailer. You were told there's...
Jack, he's publishing again this
I'm
transcript.
not publishing, I'm asking.
Your Honor,
Did you...
I object.
I haven't heard a question yet.
I'm asking. He's so mad. I'm asking. Then Judge Newman. I haven't heard a question yet. It just took me out. Why is no one laughing in that courtroom? I would have embarrassed myself and my mom if I had been in that courtroom, just laughing at this scene.
At that point, there was no additional lighting that had been put up. No.
But you and your officers were walking through that entire area, is that correct?
We were walking in the area, yes.
Okay, and did you actually walk, the feed room, and let me, maybe this is the best way to do this.
Oh, pictures, please.
I'd like to use the Elmo.
So after a great deal of time trying to make the police look incompetent, he wants to run a clip. You see him look at the machine but decide against it after the last fiasco. And finally, Workwife saves the day with pictures. And I call her Workwife because if you watch the whole dynamic, she's the one running the show. She's the one listening. She's the one putting files up for him. She's the one showing him things. And I'm guessing is the one who actually does most of the work. But even these pictures turn into a struggle. And then, of course, this is the first day of hearing testimony, and this is the day he introduces that theatrical, ridiculous head bobbing. He does it on cue every time, since he's not good at crying on cue. And I couldn't help but wonder, who chose this as the performance trick? Did he pick it himself? Was it Dick's idea, Jim's, the barber guy, Workwife? It's as off-putting as when he takes the stand and starts calling Paul Pawpaw and Rogan Roro. It's so cringe.
I have two photographs. I'm going to use the Elmo in just a moment to show this witness. I'm going to offer these into evidence without objection by the state, as I understand it.
Once they're marked, I have no objection. I would note they're graphic and they need to be shielded from view.
Elmo ready?
They can be marked. What would the exhibit numbers be for the defense?
They're on the way at this point, right?
I believe they were, yes.
And so if okay, so let's put the other one up. And identify this for me, please.
That's Maggie Murdaugh.
Your Honor, may we approach here briefly?
Watching this was also so cringe. He couldn't keep an intelligent line of questioning. Since we reviewed Dick's tips for success in court in my last video, this all makes sense. He tries to wing it with dirty tricks. Those are his tips for success in court. He's just not up to a real fight using actual facts. He was not prepared for this trial.
Who's that standing inside the feed room?
Just inside that doorway was Deputy McDowell.
Okay. Were you present? Oh, is that your body cam? So you're watching him do it, right?
That's correct.
Should he have done that?
Stand where he's standing?
Standing inside the feed room.
It's part of the crime scene. We're all standing inside of the crime scene.
Inside what?
The crime scene? We are all standing in the same crime scene.
I understand the same crime scene, but clearly you believe, based on discussion, and everyone in your unit believed, that the fatal shot was made where he's basically standing, correct? That in that area.
Where we are all standing?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Is that procedure to walk around on top of an area where shots have been fired? That perhaps, and I think even in this they're talking about tissue or brain matter laying there. Aren't you supposed to You don't put anything on your feet.
Question. There's not a question in that statement.
Objection sustained. You must pose questions.
Did you in any way have your men or women put protective gear on their feet? I saw you put gloves on, but did they put anything to insulate themselves from contaminating the scene?
On their feet, no.
In many instances, departments around the country have people dress in a gown to keep their DNA, their hair, from contaminating the scene. Did you do that?
We do not on road patrol at Gallatin County as standard practice, no.
You do not do that.
Not a standard practice, no.
He goes on with this line of questioning that's just so silly to me. But he's questioning, did the police wear boots? Did they wear gowns? Why did they step here? Why did they step there? They might have stepped on microscopic evidence. We're talking about an outdoor scene where it's raining. Paul is literally laying in water where dog urine and feces had just been hosed and where Bubba had just killed a chicken. We're not talking about some pristine area that has zero contaminants. People come to this place all the time. Workers, Paul's friends, Alex's friends. It's an outdoor kennel where Paul is laying in dog pee and dog poo and Dick is complaining about footprints. They were careful not to step in blood. No blood was tracked anywhere. So he's speaking, like I said, about things that didn't even happen. And then he goes back to these so-called tire tracks again. And they're nothing more than smashed wet grass that can't hold an impression. These are the things that he goes on and on about all morning. I mean, I get it. All he can do is try to make the police seem incompetent. That's all he has, but still it irks me. But never fear. Creighton sets the record straight, and as a bonus, shows how easy it is to play the videos.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court. You were asked a series of questions about contaminating evidence. Are you aware that any evidence was contaminated in this case?
I'm not.
Did you engage in everything you could to avoid contaminating evidence?
Yes.
Did you, in fact, instruct your deputies set up a crime scene and instruct them to avoid areas where evidence might be contaminated?
We did everything we possibly could to avoid contaminating evidence.
Your officers all have basic training in trying to avoid contamination of evidence?
Yes.
Are you also, though, as first responders in a fluid situation, doing the best you can to assess what's going on?
Correct.
It's not your job to do the actual crime scene investigation work, is that correct?
Not at all.
All right. Were these like tracks in the dirt, or were these just impressions in the grass, in the dewy grass?
They appear to be impressions on the dewy grass.
Right. They weren't like tracks in the dirt that you saw, correct?
No.
All right. I'm going to go back to the video. I'm playing it at approximately 25 minutes and 11 seconds.
Me. Okay. From earlier, but only two were mine.
Did you go out this way at all?
No.
Billy Trap.
Bring back.
Again, these dogs just bark continuously throughout these body cam videos. There is no way anyone snuck up on this kennel undetected to the point where Paul was just nonchalantly in the feed shed and Maggie completely off guard, neither of them with defensive wounds. If shooters had come up on foot, the dogs would have been alerting like they are now. Paul would have come out, what's going on? Maggie would have come over, what are they barking at? If shooters had driven up, the dogs would have been alerting, just like they are, plus Paul and Maggie would have heard the car as well. So all of this fuss over tire tracks is just silly. No one drove up or walked up to that kennel and killed them.
Just go over to that corner of the building.
I'm almost to you. Let me see what we have first and whether or not we can handle that part or not.
I see quite a few tire tracks in here. Were any of these you going in and out?
No, I came in here and I left one time and I came back.
Okay.
But the rest of them, maybe from earlier, but
Okay.
only 2 are mine.
Did you go out this way?
So the images that we just saw, those were the dewy impressions in the grass that you were just talking about, is that correct?
That's correct.
And the defendant said 2 of them were mine and the rest of them may have been from earlier, is that correct?
Yes.
The boat case. Did you have any detailed knowledge or understanding of the boat case when you arrived at the scene?
No.
You just knew very generally that there was some boat case, is that right?
Yes, it had been in the news.
Did you even realize that this was that Paul Murdaugh when you arrived on the scene?
Not until he had brought up the boat incident.
And who brought up the boat incident?
Mr. Murdaugh did.
And within a few minutes of you arriving, he's the one that brought up the boat incident, is that
He did.
correct? And he offered that right out of the gate as a possible explanation for what happened here, is that right?
Yes.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
So now this is the officer that Alex had stopped what he was doing and said, "How you doing?" And again, it's just so odd.
Right there to the right, what is that to the right of the screen?
It'd be Miss Murdaugh's body.
Murdaugh. Margaret Brandstetter Murdaugh.
Who are those individuals right there?
Sergeant Green and Mr. Murdaugh.
How you doing?
What did the defendant say to you right there?
He said, "How are you doing?"
Did you know him?
No, sir.
How you doing? That's what he said?
Yes, sir.
What's her birthday?
I'm okay.
9/15/68.
And now we know that he was saying it to someone he didn't even know. At first I thought, oh, he saw someone he recognized. But it's just odd, because he's not acting like someone who's surprised by finding half their family brutally murdered. None of this is normal. He appears to have just accepted already. They're gone. Once it confirmed, has decided it's the boat crash, all neatly tied up in a bow. Why hasn't he wondered if it's a result of all the millions of dollars of stealing from his clients he's done? Why is it immediately Paul's fault in his mind? And why has he just accepted it all with no question? From 5 minutes into his call to 911, it's all wrapped up in his mind, and it's Paul's fault.
Why are there so many shell casings and only one? Can I see a couple more pieces? I found some more there.
My friend.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out why there's 3 in our blackout. Trying to figure out why there's so many shell casings, but only one gunshot went to the back of each head. Not my job to figure that out. I'm just curious. I only saw one more casing, but just in case I see more.
The officer asking why are there so many shell casings is such a good question. It also shows again just how frantic this killing was. People come on here on my channel and they comment that it was a cartel hit or that it was 2 shooters, but I've always said it's too messy for that. And in my last podcast video, I mentioned the shell casings make a path from where Paul was shot up to and around Maggie. If it were 2 people, a hit, they would have divided, one to Maggie, one to Paul, not walked up together, one waiting for Paul to be shot, then the other from that same spot start shooting Maggie. Marker 13 here is a bullet shot from the direction of the feed shed towards Maggie, but the gun was down, so it hit the ground, leaving fragments. Then a series of frantic shots heading up to her, hitting the doghouse behind her, hitting her in several places till finally she drops down to her hands and knees, and then the 2 more shots that actually kill her. I just keep coming back to this. 2 shooters would have lined up their shots while they were out of sight and took them out in one shot, maybe 2. So Dick's description of this as execution is wrong. Execution style is one simple shot to the head. Or this is not that. This is messy.
There's one there. There's blood over here.
He mentions this blood that he's about halfway between the bodies, maybe a little closer to Maggie, but it makes me wonder if Alex was dripping some of Paul's blood as he walked over there. Paul's shots were not fired in this direction, so it wouldn't be from his shots. Now, it could be Maggie's blood since she was shot one time from the back in this direction. So I guess it depends on whose blood that is, but I do wonder if they tested that blood, because if that's Paul's blood, it's pretty definitive that whoever shot Paul came in that direction and dripped Paul's blood.
Is it your job to be doing a crime scene collection for this case, or are you just doing that to assist those who will do that will arrive at a later time?
No, sir. I don't collect anything. I'm just marking it so that they're not disturbed. Yeah, those will be easy to find. I was just marking a couple that were in the gravel that might be harder to see at some point. I don't think there's going to be anything for me and anybody to do here.
What did you just say right there?
I don't think there's going to be anything for me and Evo to do here.
All right. What did you mean by that?
There was no article search that needed to be conducted right then and there. Putting Evo on the ground could have caused more of a disturbance than just leaving him up.
Who's that to the right of the screen right there?
That would be me.
All right. And what are you about to do?
Step inside and assist CID with lifting that sheet.
All right. And were you asked to do that?
Yes, sir.
And who asked you to do that?
Captain Chapman.
All right. And where's Captain Chapman in this image?
In the middle.
And is he a senior officer to you?
At that time.
Okay. And I noticed before you moved, what did you do?
Turned my light on.
And why did you turn on your light?
So that I could plainly see what was underneath me where I was going.
Did you disturb any evidence or anything as you started to go into the feed room?
No, sir.
Were you careful to avoid doing that?
Yes, sir.
Did you kick any shell casings or waddings or anything like that when you went into the feed room?
No, sir.
Did you step on any bloody footprints when you went into the feed room?
No, sir.
If you had seen something like that before you stepped in there, what would you have done?
I would have stopped and notified the detective.
So despite everything that Dick has tried to say about them, they were obviously concerned about keeping the scene intact despite being accused otherwise. Like I said, it was raining that night. They were trying to preserve a crime scene that was about to get washed away. It must be terrible to do your best in such horrible circumstances and have someone publicly tearing you down. These guys aren't the bad guys here. They showed up to do their jobs. Their jobs aren't easy, and their pay isn't great, and this is the thanks they get from their state senator. Meanwhile, Dick is collecting the kind of money that would take them several years of their jobs to make. And he's doing so very poorly himself while criticizing their hard work.
Is that how you found Paul when you arrived at the scene?
Yes, sir.
And were his hands underneath him in that fashion when you arrived at the scene?
Yes, sir.
Now this is important for later, so please remember it.
And I guess what I'm trying to ask is, why then were you trying to look for shell casings? Why couldn't you wait till the next morning? Why was this urgency? I mean, was somebody getting away, or I don't quite understand why.
I can't answer that. I don't know. I didn't know if somebody was getting away or not.
Did somebody instruct you to go find shell casings?
No, sir.
You just did it on your own initiative?
Yes, sir.
And you concede that you may have disturbed or destroyed evidence in that process?
Microscopic or something I didn't see.
Well, microscopic, something down in the grass. I mean, you're walking on grass.
Does he even understand crime scene investigation? Does he think that they're going to bring microscopes and look at every blade of grass while they're gowned, gloved, masked, and in booties? So let's get this straight. First, he was upset that they didn't urgently take tire track impressions, and now he's upset that they urgently noted shell casings. Did he want them to preserve evidence quickly or not?
Right. Not
yes,
not
sir.
A smooth surface like in the shed, in the feed room, but it's grass at night, correct?
Yes, sir.
And I guess what I'm trying to wonder is what y'all were doing. Were you trying to solve a crime? Were you trying to just index everything was there? And when did you find out SLED was coming?
So we're trying to mark everything there. As you can tell, there were multiple units going back and forth, fire rescue as well as sheriff's office. We try to mark it so that it brings awareness to them and it doesn't become disturbed.
I'm sorry, I can't understand you. I can't hear you.
There were multiple units on scene,
Right.
sheriff's office as well as fire rescue.
Right.
The reason that I saw urgency to mark those shell casings is so that it brings awareness to those of us that were walking around and they don't become disturbed.
Well, that brings up the question, should you have been walking around? What if you got 2 dead people, whoever the perpetrator was, at that point y'all hadn't identified, had you?
No, sir.
Okay, so the perpetrator may be in the woods across the street as far as you know at that point, right?
Could have been anywhere.
Right. So you're not trying to solve a crime, you're processing a scene.
I'm not processing anything.
You don't know what you're doing.
I just told you what I was doing, sir.
You're marking pieces of evidence.
Yes, sir.
And the urgency to do that was so that no one else would walk over them
Yes, sir.
while you're walking around them.
Around. Yes, sir.
Well, you don't know whether you actually stepped on one or not, do you?
I was very careful not to.
Okay. Now, let me also ask you this. The pattern of the first shell casing was how far away from the feed room?
I can't say.
That you found?
The first shell casing I found?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
10 feet, 20 feet, more than me, further than?
Probably about the same distance from me to you.
Okay. From the feed room door?
Yes, sir.
Now, I understand, and you got a blackout, right?
Yes, sir.
And when you fire that, does it eject to the right or the left?
To the right. Mine does.
Okay. So if the feed room is where I am, that shell casing ejected to the right and forward, right and back? What do you know?
Are you asking where the shell casing was in relation to the door? It would have been forward and right of the door.
Forward and right of the door. And there was the pattern of casings leading, do they all lead to her body?
I can't remember.
I don't know if you saw the documentary with the journalist who got to tag along with the jury on their field trip to Moselle, but she was filmed counting her steps from Paul's body to Maggie's, and it was only 12 normal steps. So this first shell casing had to be just a couple of steps at the most from Paul.
Just a couple of final questions. Since I have no further questions.
And redirect.
You were asked earlier about apprehending any suspects. Was Mr. Murdaugh ever in custody?
No, sir, not to my recollection.
To your observation, was he allowed to move freely?
Yes, sir.
Was he allowed to interact with people who came to talk to him?
Yes, sir.
Was he ever placed in the back of a police car?
Not that I'm aware of.
Never put in handcuffs?
No, sir.
Was he being treated as a suspect when you were there?
Not that I'm aware of.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Again, this treatment of Alex is very important for later, so please remember it. For the sake of time, we're going to stop here at the lunch break. I thought I'd get through all of day 2 and half of day 3, but I just couldn't stop talking. Anyway, I've already begun working on the rest of day 2, so I'll be getting that to you as soon as I can. Till then, this is Cassidy O'Connell saying stay well and stay tuned.